So those of you may know, my name's Jeremiah. I go by Jay, and I have a video production company. I opened up INCITE Productions in 2012, and I thought I was going to be a producer, just taking care of logistics on other people's shoots. And then I found myself interviewing people more and more, and as time went on, and I really loved it, turns out. And I love hearing people's stories, and I found the lesson that everybody has something to teach me. And then I just wanted to explore that kind of opportunity more, and I thought a podcast might be a really fun way to do it. And then I thought the first guests I would have would be friends that I've learned actually a lot from about many different things. And the title that we have here is Free Lunch. We want all of our listeners, viewers, to get a free lunch, so to speak, of learn something that is valuable that we can apply. And this came from life experience and pain and blood and sweat and tears. So there's a few things that I've learned from you, and I think let's lay them out at the beginning of it, and then we'll cover these ABC. You and I have known each other for almost 20 years now. We go back
it's crazy
many different versions of life, and I know from the beginning, like a story I'm going to share is so it's back in 2007, and I'm getting married. And I had a friend design the programs. Yes, that's the word. Programs for our service. And at the time, you worked at a place that had a printer that could print these programs and a folding machine that could fold them. I believe you had a folding machine. And but I just didn't know anything about anything at the time, and there was a bleed on the programs. There was a white bleed. So for those of you who don't know, when the printer prints it, there's a little bit of white left on the outside of the page. And I had asked you a favor. It's a really easy job to do this, and you saw that, and you went in and you manually cut off all the white bleed, so these things looked perfect. And that was one of the first times I encountered extreme conscientiousness. Extreme, like if somebody's gonna bring me into something, that something is going to be done properly and right. Not like, oh, that's somebody else's problem. I did what I was supposed to do kind of vibe. So that's the first thing that I want to hear from you. And then we've had so many conversations over the years. We've been working together with INCITE in some version, another 5 years now. We've been many weird places and done many odd things together, situations that we probably never hoped to find ourselves in, but somehow we ended up being really fun. Yeah. And somehow trying to create beauty and aesthetic and always making people look good, look their best. So those are kind of like the three buckets I want to cover. First, like the extreme conscientiousness. Second, just aesthetics and why that matters. And then how do we always make people look their best? And why does that matter to people like you and I? So the extreme conscientiousness, where did that come from with you? How did that develop? And why do you obviously care so much about this?
Well, I think until you brought that story up and brought the subject matter up, I probably wouldn't have even thought about it. I think it's one of those things that, I don't know if it's nature, nurture, kind of what happens there, but I got to think that an Asian mom, I got to think that an engineer dad, that's somewhere in the mix growing up, I got a lot of doses of, this is how things should be done. This is where stuff goes. This is what things should look like. This is how people should be treated, on and on. And growing up in the South, in addition. So I think there's a people component to that Southern hospitality that's maybe a branch off of that same thing. So I think if I have to, to do the archaeology, my guess is that it goes back to observing that there. Now, we grew up poor. We grew up, in an environment where it wasn't about expensive and proper always. It was just, I could watch my dad's way of thinking, and he's very analytical. He's very methodical, very flow chart. And I remember going to work with him and watching him do all the schematics. He was drafting oriented, and based everything was microchips and circuit boards and back then. So I could see his mind operate, but he was also a musician. So I could understand that it wasn't just about the mundane or getting the task done, but there was something special and beautiful and fun to be had too, which I observed more on his musical side. And obviously with my Asian background, some things come with that. And so my mom, on the other hand, was this is how things are supposed to be. And she came to this country not even speaking the language back in the 70s. So I watched her grapple through learning a language, learning through to how to make money, to building relationships, to all the pieces. And I think just through and through, even to this day, my mom is very conscientious. That's just who she is as a person. And I think I'm probably more like her in that sense than my dad, though my dad had the mechanics of all of those pieces. So again, I wouldn't have even thought of that as a thing. I don't get up necessarily in the morning and think about conscientiousness per se, but I do go over lists. I do watch calendars, and I do make plans and try to set things up and knock them down as best I can. But, cutting the bleed off a wedding program, that's just the way they're supposed to be. And I think that probably dovetails into another piece of that puzzle for me, which is solving people's problems as best I know how, and as best I know how in any given situation. And that could be relational. It could be some sort of a physical thing that needs to be done, or some sort of client relationship piece, or some sort of thing around the studio, whatever it is. If I can solve a problem in some way, and part of that is intuiting what that problem might be, I would guess that couple getting married, stressful, we're young, all of the pieces, what the last thing they need to think about is cutting the bleed off their programs.
Right.
And that's something that I think about a lot, because I'm that guy. I work with graphics and design and print. So no big deal for me to cut a bleed off a program. Probably a bigger deal for you to figure out how to fit that into the list of a million things you have to do. And so I try to take that into everything that we do, whether it's INCITE, whether it's my photography, client management for sure is trying to understand what their problem is and trying to get ahead of actually solving it, and not just doing my part, not just doing my job, but being conscientious about the whole thing. And that experience, it's that experience that's going to get me back to the table with that client anyway, not necessarily how well I did on the product itself. It's how they felt about that experience more than what they got from that experience. Absolutely. At least in my experience.
For sure. So if I understood what you said, just a quick frame up of it is, it's a little bit DNA, a lot of DNA there, perhaps. I think so. But I want to push into that a little bit, because I don't think that's the end of the story there. Like, perhaps your family of origin brought you to this place, but I've still seen you make conscious decisions to be this way. Whether, again, as much life as we've at least parallelly lived together over however long, whether it's professionally, relationally, there have been bumps in the road.
Sure.
And I'm not saying you've batted 1,000, but I've always seen an intent that you don't want to burn bridges. You don't want to burn stuff up. You want people, even people that may have gone out of their way to make situations difficult for you or myself or people you care about, you still try to have them leave the best they can out of that situation. That is a conscious effort. That is not, that's just the way I was taught. So does that frame up make any sense to you? And do you have any thoughts around that?
Yes, frame up makes sense. I think it's tough. I recently, had some stuff where I feel like I didn't put myself in the way to have deserved that kind of treatment. And I had, I think, even around me, a periphery that was saying, you shouldn't have been treated that way, and you should do something about it. I think there's still something, it's probably divine, ultimately, but I think it's just like leaving a room the way you found it. It's just like putting your dishes, there's things that are like, that's just the way it should be. And if I don't start with making the world the way it should be, then I'm never going to be able, or shouldn't ever expect anyone else to give a shit about it, or even to try. Yeah. And the bumps, whether that's, our special needs daughter or divorce or all the pieces, inertia is very hard to crack. So I could set out on a path that is going to be vindictive or even bitter or resentful, or I could set out on a path that at least embodies what I want and what I hope for. And I want inertia to carry me that way and not this way, because inertia is the culture is going to keep pulling me this way.
Absolutely.
And so, even surrounding myself with people like you, other people who want the best, even in the midst of the worst, is what I want for life. Because why wouldn't we? I don't understand wallowing. I don't understand staying resentful over things. I understand being wounded. I understand being hurt. I understand having to take time to heal and to process. But all of that is in order to get back on the field. It's not just to stay on the bench, finish that metaphor. So anyway, I think I'm honored you would bring those pieces up and that you've observed that, but I think it's because we create the world that we want to be in.
For sure.
And I don't know why you wouldn't create the best one possible.
Well, I think that not only do you act that way, you treat others that way, which I've always appreciated. As you know, I love stories and I love storytelling, and Pixar has I think it's 22 rules of storytelling. It might be 21. And one of them is you care more about what a character attempts to do, tries to do, rather than what they actually succeed. And I know that in our relationship, there's many times I've had to come to you like, look, this failed. This screwed up. We crashed and burned here, and you've had to bleed with me on some of that. And I've never felt like, well, had you done it my way, or fill in the blank, I think empowerment response. I've never encountered that from you. So I was like, yeah, what are we doing next? Like, it's fine. We're not staying here. I think to lead to that inertia thought, like we know that there has been a trajectory set. It's probably not a clean line, but we know that there's pieces that will compound and have compounded upon each other to get each other there. It's fun to encounter that foresight and be encouraged with that methodology of days where I might be a little bit more of a person. It's like, let's go set fire to some stuff because that'd feel real good right now. And no, because people would then set fire to our stuff, and we don't want that, and we don't want to be fire starters.
And then you have to be that person.
Yeah.
You're now living with the fact that you're that man, you're that woman. And I don't want that. That's not going to help me get where I want to go, nor is it going to help solve any problems going back to before. So why in the world would we take that posture? It doesn't even feel that good. Certainly not for very long, at least not to me.
No.
So I think it's much better. Like, that burn up. Well, who cares? We'll do better next time on our conscientiousness. We'll do better on whatever the piece of the puzzle that was missing. And then let's just get back to it. Let's get back on the horse. And I think doing that in the context of a relationship and doing that in the context of a community where we can trust that we're all doing the best we can, then why in the world will we light each other up if things don't go right? That doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, recently I've probably had some experiences that may have changed my opinion on this, but I think, man, I've really encountered very few bad actors in this world. Somebody that is actively trying to create damage and harm. Now, I've encountered a lot of damage and harm, but I think it's just, we're people. We're messy. Lives are complicated. It's like, inevitably the morning of a shoot, my son freaks out and I spill something on my shirt, and you show up and you're like, okay, what do we do now? How do we put the best foot forward?
I think if we lose the last little bits of compassion for the people who behave most terribly to us, then we've lost as humans. We've lost as people that can actually connect. And it doesn't matter how good you are at whatever it is you do, doesn't have how much money you can earn because of your product or whatever it is. It just doesn't matter if we can't see another human anymore.
Absolutely.
In my head.
I know there's something that in my more recent years that I've always strived for, and it's remarkable to me how difficult it is, and it's to finish well. Whatever it is, because everything comes to an end, right? Relationships come to an end, clients come to an end, ideas come to an end, but how do you finish them well so everybody can walk away? Even if it's a client that left the table, pulled the plug, man, I still want the best for them. Now, I have to do a lot of soul searching sometimes to get to that spot. But also, like in the past, I have to look in the past few years, man, there's been some stuff where I've really just screwed up. And I do think I've encountered some grace from people. Like they don't wish any ill will of me for that. And I can say that I've never honestly gone into a situation. It's like, I want to screw this up. I want to burn this thing down. That's never been a thought in my mind, just some life circumstances and poor judgment or execution or whatever has allowed those things to transpire. Excuse me. So,
and that's everybody.
Oh, for sure.
And a lot of people spend a lot of time hiding or masking all of that reality, but that is everybody.
Yeah. And the masking and the hiding is when I do think when it spills out, it's a tidal wave of just, whoa, what happened? You see the quintessential midlife crisis. And it's like, yeah, there's many reasons for that. And I think some's just biological stuff that just happens to men in their early mid 40s, that spectrum of life. But when you encounter
My
the guy,
age? Is that what you're saying?
no, aren't you past that by now?
Hey, no. Yeah, I'm in my mid late. You're right.
Yeah. I mean, at 38, I feel like, I'm starting to feel some of those cliches. But you see those people that feel them. That's everybody, versus the person that like leaves his family and buys a sports car, right? That's just a different thing. And we're probably pretty far off the reservation now, but it's the whole point of this podcast, the whole point of even talking to somebody like you, this whole point of being intentional to be in relationship and professional and personal relationship with somebody like you is like, I like the waypoints that you remind me of. Because I feel like, you didn't say trajectories. You said, what was the word you said, that you're going this way or this way?
It was an inertia talk.
Inertia, yeah. So you say inertia. I think the thing that makes sense in my mind is ideas and physical things have mass. And the more mass, the more that thing's going to make you orbit around it. And there's bad ideas with a lot of mass. And there's good ideas and good people with a lot of mass. And I think that you're one of those people that keep me orbiting around the right things. Not always. Nobody's perfect, and I don't expect that from you or anyone.
Certainly try. It's interesting. Our mutual friend Mackie at one point.
Hi, Jared.
Hey, Mackie. He referenced my Easternness one time with regard to something, and it was in contrast, I think, to like basically you're willing to be patient and willing to wait, or you're like something that we might expect is only going to take this long. You're okay if it takes this long. And just because of where you're from and how you were brought up. And I'd never really thought of it quite that way. And I'm not sure what the topic was, but I think if you were to stack up over time, inertia that is compassionate and is full of giving benefit of the doubt, that is positive, to use, today's terms, versus stacking up over time, I need to feel better because I was mistreated,
right?
Or I need to get back because of whatever happened, or any of the things that feel like injustices. If we feel like we're going to act out to make those justices right, I feel like over time, the good stack is always going to end up in a better place. I'm not saying it's going to make more money. You've got to sleep with yourself at the end of the day. And I would rather have lost the job or whatever the situation is and still feel good about who I am and have added another piece in this puzzle than this person I don't want to be. And I think over time, it's worth it. It's an investment. And I don't think by and large we're willing to invest in much of anything anymore. We want the quick fix.
Absolutely.
We want drop shipping overnight $1 million businesses. We want influencer money. We want all the things that
I'm the best disruptor ever.
Absolutely. Aren't we all? And we're going to be the best storytellers ever and brand marketers and all the things. Well, maybe, but then you're going to take and operate one way or the other. And you're going to operate with a sense of conscientiousness and grace, or you're going to operate with a sense of how fast can I get where I'm trying to go, no matter what it costs or who it costs. And I don't want to be that person. No. And I still think that person loses, even if they don't know they're losing. I think kind of globally, cosmically, they lose. They lose still, even if it doesn't ever look like it. I think they're losing, and then I already have compassion for them in their loss. They're losing, and they don't even know they're losing. They don't even know. And
it's not like compassion that I'm better than. It's like, no, really, that sucks. Like, we don't wish that upon anybody.
Right. We don't wish that upon anybody. No. So why would you allow yourself to think ill of that person if you wouldn't say no, I wouldn't wish that on them in a million years. So,
for a long time I had a thought of like, make decisions throughout the day where you can be proud. You look at yourself in the mirror at night and be proud of what you did. And I probably moved that to be content of what you did. And especially when you add a business owner, parent to that equation, those things just...
Marriage.
Yeah, it's volatile, right? Like some of these things feel like oil and water at times. And I do think it is important to surround ourselves with people, whether it's inertia or an orbit that... Oh yeah, because these are the things that pay out. Like 30 years, the projects that we worked on 15 years ago, honestly, I probably couldn't care less about, right? Like, I'm not saying they weren't valuable at the time, but now it's just like, what did matter, right? Over decade plus of life is these other things. And again, not that they've gone perfectly either, but they at least hold value and weight.
Right.
So we could talk about this all day, and I'm not sure if anybody wants to listen to us talk about this anything more, although these ideas are things that John and I, we find ourselves talking about a lot. And I really enjoy these conversations. But probably just like in our normal work day, we're like, okay, now what are we going to do for work, right? I think let's get there. And we are in a business that... data is very important, but data gives a very incomplete picture of what we're actually doing.
Sure.
There's Malcolm Gladwell would call it blink, but there's a vibe. There's an aesthetic about every person and product and situation that you encounter. Everybody gets a vibe from that, and then very quickly decides if they like that vibe or if they don't like that vibe. Right. And if they like it, they're going to pursue that thing. If they don't like it, they're going to start to move away from that thing. So you're somebody that images is a vibe that you tend to create and spend a lot of time about. We've spent countless hours talking about the shape of light and fixtures, whether it's for still photography or video. We talk about words and even the shape of words on a page of how they look well. I've never been able to really unpack why this is so impactful. It seems like everything I do is like, oh, that's good enough, but it's never... it never feels satisfactory to me. But I feel like when I talk to you about it, I get a sense of, oh yeah, that's why this matters. So with that frame up, does that make sense for you to move forward?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I feel horribly inadequate really to address it in any way that seems or reeks of authoritative, because I don't view myself that way. I think I can maybe draw or pull some lines of congruency from things that have made sense from beauty aesthetics, and kind of how that has translated into our optical reception, because I do spend a lot of time doing that, as we both do. And I think there is, once again, I think there's a divinity in there that it's hard to speak of this day and age as freely as we might have in another time or in another space.
Absolutely.
But I do think there is something that is orchestrating all of this, and I think with that orchestration, there is a sense of order, there is a sense of whimsical, there is a sense of light and dark and balance of color, and there are things that kind of come because there is a creator, there is a divinity component here. So when I take that all the way down into our manifestations in the humanity side of things, then I think there has over time, then there's history. So what might have been divine that becomes human now has been over time. Right. And over time, there are things that have read well to the human brain, that read well to the human heart, to the mind, to how we see things and how we have agreed over centuries now or millennia that thing is a beautiful thing. That is a fine thing. That is a thing that is worthy of some sort of reverence, respect, attention, whatever investment we're going to make into that thing. So for me, I think I always look for or always want a sense of order, but combined with that sense of freedom, with that sense that I haven't taken anything from the thing that I'm shooting, but I have given it a place for it to be itself. And whether that is shooting in a room like this, where you and I are meticulous about angles and getting things just the way they're supposed to be,
right?
That is that sense of propriety and order that we want. That translates into composition over here for camera people, but that isn't the show. You know, hopefully the musings of our hearts and minds is the show,
right?
That's the content, and that's where the freedom lies. We just kind of set the stage for that. So I like that combination of things. And it's not that this thing is intrinsically more beautiful than this thing most of the time when I'm contemplating it or thinking about it or even working with it in a shoot or that kind of thing. But I think there is beauty in that combination of that order and freedom kind of in its mix. And I think that's the divine becoming human over time, which I would have never put that formula together until, you know, it just made some sense now. So
right.
I think going back to the earlier conversation, solving people's problems from a more functional standpoint,
right.
I think helping people look their best. I succeed when they succeed. They succeed when they present themselves in the best way possible.
Right.
And so I think from our branding and marketing and creative standpoint, that should be really important.
Absolutely.
That should be important for us as creators to make things look as good as possible, no matter what that thing is, because they will do better than the client, and we will do better because they do better. So it is important to me that, particularly when you get a person who has their own set of feelings
right.
and thoughts, they're walking into the room with how they feel about themselves, and then they're going to add to that how they feel about the environment and about you and I want them to feel as good as possible about who they are, and I want to use all the tools at our disposal to showcase them in the way that I think is most befitting, and listen at the same time, to be perceptive and intuitive enough to understand, hopefully, what is actually important to them, and not just assume, well, your hair goes this way, I'm going to put the light over here because I think that looks better. They might like a certain thing a certain way, and
right.
so I've got to have that combination of being preemptive with what my eye wants to see, and taste cultivation is going to come into that.
Okay.
But then I also want to hear and know as much as I can what they're saying about themselves, whether it's with words or with body language or whatever it is, and try to meet in the middle and try to confirm with them that I think you look amazing here.
So sorry, we had to take a quick technical break. Getting back to the idea of, I've been in this business a while, and I've been victim of this, or been actually the perpetrator of this, of forgetting that people are people, and they're just not pieces on the board. They're just not a piece in my game that I need to get us somewhere. And whether it's me taking a photo or whether it's I've been around other people or seen other people's works, and it's like, yeah, compositionally that work is perfect, but that isn't really beneficial to the person we're shooting, right? The person's, you may have a Rembrandt light and this perfect rule of third, but the person may be older and you're calling out a lot of wrinkles on them, and we can kind of sense that they may not be comfortable with this. And the thing that in working with you at first, sometimes I'm like, man, our stuff this shot isn't cinematic enough. It's not wow enough from the stuff that geeks us out.
Sure.
But then after working with it and encountering it, it's like, oh my gosh, these people just feel right? And they feel right because they're acting right, and we're capturing that moment. And the more and more I'm in this business, the more and more I believe in authenticity, doubling down on it, because that's really the only story that matters, is who these people are, right? And I think in today's world where the long tail content is getting more and more play, that's why, because we want to find our vein of content and mine it to the nth degree. And
we want to know and be known.
Absolutely.
And I think that goes down all the way to when, client X walks on the set, they want to know and be known. The being known part is all my inadequacies that I don't want to tell you.
For
but
sure.
I want you to know them.
Yeah.
Because I want you to, mollify any of that effect you can in that camera.
Yeah.
So anyway, I didn't mean.
Well, no, I think that's even like a perfect example of how this plays out with us. I'm talking about this idea that I want to put stuff in this thing, and you're like, well, hold on. This is why, this is the thing. And I think that makes me a better director. And I think other people should hear this thought, because I think as creatives, we can forget so much about why we're doing what we're doing. This isn't about our creativity or our art. This is about us coming alongside each other, our clients, the people, the talent, to create something that's special, right? And that doesn't happen by somebody just like, I know best, or I know whatever. It takes that person that is, back to the previous point, conscientious of the surroundings and intuitive of people and how they're feeling and what can we do. And, you know, I've been in many situations where I'm doing something and just got 6 things on my plate, and you're like, Jay, hey, what about that? Oh, that's actually a really big thing that I missed, but being around this. And this might be my own soapbox, but I think more creatives need to think about this stuff. Because I think that's where the great work really happens. The people we work with and for us are not our subjects. They're not the people we rule over. They're our partners in this thing. And let's go discover what makes them look beautiful and amazing.
Sure.
Because we've interviewed and filmed and shot like hundreds of people, and have yet to find anybody that's like, you're not beautiful. Now, there may be the societal brunette, 5'11", 127 pounds. There's that version, and I have no knocks against that version. But there's many other versions that are equally as beautiful, and I'm not trying to be postmodern here. Like, I really believe it. If you search for it, it's there. And I think that it's... You know, let's talk about the tactics of it, of even something like Photoshop. Photoshop probably doesn't get this bad rap as it did 10 years ago because everybody's filtering everything they shoot now. But I know a long time ago, I mean, we're probably talking a decade ago, you and I had a conversation about Photoshop. And again, I'm a guy that likes to turn knobs. I'm a guy that likes to really strive for that perfection and make things, but then it feels plastic. And I think any creative has crossed this line probably many times, especially at the first part of their career, right? And we were talking about Photoshop, and you said, yeah, anything I'm probably going to repeat this poorly, but anything I do is going to make that person how they look. They just didn't look that way at that moment, because we are really giving an unfair representation of people. For you are taking one frame, 1/200th of a second of their life, and here, look at this. That's not real. That's not the way we were meant to perceive things. So then, yeah, there may be a little Photoshop of, I'm going to open this eye a little bit or whatever, because the 200th of a second before that, they were doing that, right? But it's a very authentic way to use these tools and do production to, again, go back to make people look their best, not what we perceive their best should be. Yeah. So that, I probably filled in the answer a little more than I should have there.
That was good.
But I'd like to hear from you about that.
Yeah. Post-processing, manipulation of pixels, Photoshop, whatever app you're using to do that, I think it's a delicate pursuit. I think everybody has what comfort level they have with whatever those apps are. And yes, I agree. If I have a shoot and we might shoot 100 frames of one outfit, and it's going to be frame 57, that's our keeper, but there was something about 48, body angle, eyes were more open, hair was better. Like, I personally don't think it's a manipulation on my behalf to take what I say, number 57, and give it via Photoshop a piece of what happened over here in 48 or wherever it was. So I think when you are taking a photo and putting it up against someone else as a norm, or some sort of industry standard as a norm, there's a lot of jeopardy there, a lot of caution that should be between here and there. I think when you're comparing a person to themselves 3 frames ago, you're comparing themselves to what I know they look like standing right there. I think that is a different thing. So I am perfectly comfortable with making them their best self, especially knowing that 3 frames ago, that piece of their puzzle was where it needed to be. And in this case, all the other pieces were in the place they're supposed to be, except for that piece. I know it's a little shrouded, but I think that hopefully that point gets across. And I think we've all, as any person with a camera, had the shot or, you know, over time you have however many shots that like that photo needs nothing.
Right.
Or that, you know, whatever we shot, whatever composition, light, time of day, excuse me. And I think those shots, which are very rare, really serve as a reminder that the shot exists before you did any of the after work. Like just as a concept that the shot lives.
Right.
And that it doesn't always have to be made after the fact. Even
sure.
though our tendency is to feel like, yeah, that's pretty close, but I'll fix it in
post.
post for audio
Yeah.
guys. Yeah, and the same for, you know, visual guys. So I think you can get more out of it that you need to get out of it, whether that's color, contrast, fix exposure, all those things. There's lots of things that processing is very important. But again, we've all had that shot where it's like, I don't need to touch that thing. I don't need to get any blemishes off. I don't need to change the light. Even though your hand might start reaching for a dodge and burn, you're like, no, stop, because it's already there. And so I think because we have those moments where I know that shot can't exist, I find that I'm more reserved about what I do after the fact. That if it didn't exist or some continuum of that existing, then after the fact, I'm gonna try to do the least I need to do and stay on the hunt for the next shot. And I'll do that in camera too. If I'm shooting a still, like, yeah, that's close, but I'm feeling like, well, already I'm going to have to do this. I'm going to have to fix that. Well, move instead.
Right.
Find a new background, find better light, diffuse the light, like whatever the case may be.
Just make it
ask
happen.
for something of your subject, change something in your own brain, you know, find some other way instead of always feeling like I'm going to have to fix it in post, or I could fix it.
Well, because I think there's also, everybody knows when that happened. Like we don't know, but there is a feeling we get. Like last week, we had a client here, and it was a small business owner. Just had him talk to camera, and I was pushing him to get continuous takes, so we didn't have to cut it. And they were asking a little bit, well, can we cut? Can we do this? And I cut all day long. I have no problems with that. But there is a magic that happens when somebody's talking to you from beginning to end, and just gives you a relatively clear, concise idea. It prints. It feels real,
right.
As opposed to as soon as you start getting any sort of cut, specifically jump cuts, you're like, what are you cutting out? Are you cutting out a stumble, or are you cutting out some content that you believed, but now you're second guessing, whatever that may be? And I think that so much of what we do is actually removing what we did. And I mean that depending on what lens we use, depending on what room we're in, we're going to make decisions that we have to make to get the job done that may actually distort something or not tell half lies.
Sure.
And then in post, we want to go and do that. Make it just feel like it was the way it's supposed to be. And I'm not saying take away the magic of our industry, because it is something. You know, a cover photo is a cover photo. Like that's not a home photo. You don't want it to be. It's not supposed to be. But there's still some authenticity that I think should exist there. And that's the content that I love. And again, I'm not trying to be, you know, hyper millennial or postmodern about it, because I'll turn the knobs with the best of them. As you know, I love it. But there is that moderation, that the reminder that these are people. They're not just a pawn on your board. And I love that. So honestly, I'm not quite sure how to end this. We've definitely covered, I think, everything that we set out to cover today. I know that I appreciate you. I appreciate you sitting down here with us today, opening up your studio, the studio that we shoot in a lot. It's a fun space. And hopefully we get to do a lot more of these over the time, and more than Jared and my mom listen to this. So,
well, and if it's just them, that's great too.
Perfect. Awesome. Thanks, John.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jay.